Christ in Matthew chapter 5 verses 13 says, you are the salt of the world. What does that mean for us as a Christian community? When we are positioned as a church and the society outside suffers because the salt is losing its. To say it differently, there is no way as a church we can fulfill that mission of becoming the light or becoming the salt when we mimic the same problems that exist in a society. So, when Christ sets his church, he sets it precisely because he wants it to be a center of hope, a model of life. So, we have to be the most, in other words, we have to be the people that are quick to worry when things within the church seem to mirror what's going on outside in terms of the social ills. So, I come to you with this burden, right? And as I get into the message for today, it's thinking hard and saying, when we're experiencing these serious social problems like these, when you have black kids growing up without knowing who their father is, dysfunctional homes, when we see things that are horrendous, where is the Christian voice? If over 81% of people identify themselves as Christians, then what's going on? Why are those who are Christians outside in the community not enough to make a change? At least in the areas that are problematic. You mean there's no Christian counselor, Christian psychologist who sees these problems in black communities and is moved on the basis of the grace of Jesus Christ to do something? So, it's important that we ask ourselves and we think about the context that which we operate in. That the Christian practice necessitates that we can have the Christian theories in our minds, but if they do nothing in our day-to-day lives, then what's the basis of this Christianity? And so, let's open up to Matthew 22, verses 37, which is at least the cardinal text for today, but in line with what we have just beamed and what I've just talked about. We've been working on a paper. We've just released that paper. It's in press. So one of the things we've been doing in that paper, we're looking at certain models, statistical models, and we took the data from American Family Health Studies, which is, in other words, a web version or modernized version, in a way, of what the SABBATH that used to be run by the Center of Disease Control, which is a National Family Study for, family growth. And so we did a number of models. In one of these models, we looked at this, because in the actual, which is a national representative survey, in an actual reflecting American lives, in that actual survey, in the actual data, you have questions such as, how many sexual partners have you had in your lifetime? The distribution of that question is insane, because you have answers ranging from 20 to 99. You can almost imagine, right? Single individual has those type of experiences in their life. Now, we model this in what we call, regression models, and we looked at the binary variable that says how many sexual partners do you have, and we look at the threshold. If they are beyond 7, they are too many. You can imagine you're just setting 7, right? What we find in that study is that the variable that there's another question they ask. How many times do you attend church? What we find is the number of times that a person says they attend church, in other words, the frequency of religious attendance, is a high predictor on how many sexual partners you're going to have in your lifetime. And so it's interesting because we sort of think that Christianity, in the world, people sort of think that, we've reached an era where faith doesn't matter, Christian morals doesn't matter. But it's interesting that the moralizing agent to keep people pure, to keep families away from social ills, is a simple fact of how many times do you come to church? And that makes sense to us, right? We didn't need that data, but it's important to have it as a form of evidence to show us, at least at a scientific level, how powerful it is. Just the idea of having churches and communities. And so, in Matthew 22, verses 37, Jesus says something interesting. He says, Jesus said unto them, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy, what's the next one? With all thy soul, and with all thy mind. And I've been reflecting on this verse, again, given the context at which we're operating under. Here is Jesus calling his people to love him with all their heart, and all their mind, and all their soul, right? And there is a fellow who suggests something interesting, and I was reading, they are unrelated, but you can I relate them in this particular context, because the challenge to Christianity today seems to suggest Jesus calls us to, he says, I want the entire human being, right? I want your heart, your soul, and your mind. But the evidence seems to suggest that the modern Christian practice has only given Jesus a segment of their entire existence. In other words, we've given them the heart, the soul, but not the mind. And it is why we see our society the way it is. The moral deprivation the way we see it today. The dysfunctional homes the way we see them today. Because there is a mind of Christian that is not functional, at least at this societal level. Let's argue it. So, there's a guy, Anglican theologian, writes a book, Black and the Classics. And in the book, he says, this is his argument. There is no Christian mind. What does he mean? He says, it is a commonplace that the mind of the modern man has been secularized. So he makes a claim, this is blameless. He says, when I look at the mind of the modern man, I see a secularized mindset. It's true. There's no orientation towards the supernatural. He says, when I see the top 21, their reference is hardly ever, I don't smoke because I'm a Christian. No, it's in other words, whatever they do, people try and shy away from the idea that their values and the way they operate in life is based on God. So he makes that argument. Right? So, then he says, which is, I think, is the most tragic part. Then he says, it would not be so desperately tragic had the Christian mind held out against the secular drift. So Blemer says, no. I see the problem of the secular people. I mean, for instance, we had a friend when I was still in our program at the University of Michigan, And I mean, every time we talk about it, she'll say, no, I'm not a Christian. And she was right, I'm secular. And you could tell. In other words, whatever she does and everything she does not require a frame of reference, or in other words, the scriptures, do not form that, what we call epistemological framework of life. They don't inform, they don't make a work around sin. So, Blema says, no, I get it. For those who are not Christians, I understand the secularization of your mind. I get it. Says, the problem that I have is the Christians who, though they have ecstasy, they have excitement about God, they themselves given over to the secularization of their mind. Says the problem is these individuals who profess Jesus, who sing songs. In fact, somewhere as you go later on, here's what Blema says in his own words. He says, there is a Christian ethic, number one. Okay? He says, there's a Christian ethic. People don't drink. They don't smoke. There is a Christian ethic. Says number two, there is a Christian practice. People come to church. They sing songs. They pray. They read the Bible. Right? But then he says, here's our problem. Okay, sorry. He also says there's a Christian spirituality. But then he says this important part. But as a thinking being, the modern Christian has succumbed to secularization. When I look at the Christian as a thinking, functional human being, I don't see the evidence of his profession. I don't see the evidence of his ethic. I don't see the evidence of his spirituality. You have Christian fellows, to give an example, who work in advertisement agencies. Though they come to God's church, though they sing songs of heaven, but they preside over advertisement programs that have nothing to do. Let me give an example. The BMW will come and say, we want to sell our new model. Devise a marketing strategy. Brother X, who's Christian, who goes to Detroit, Northwest, or Ann Arbor, SDA, would look at this and say, okay, what are we going to do? He gets a crew of naked women. He gets the car rolling up, and somewhere the women are fascinated by the car because he has read a society that sex sells. He uses that as a means to sell this car. It is an example of someone who loves the Lord their God with all their heart, with all their soul, but their mind is given to secularization. Absolutely no intellectual commitment to the gospel of Jesus. People practice Christianity, people profess Christianity, but how they run their lives, how they engage in issues, sometimes has nothing to do with the God of heaven. We are in this mess today because people claim the Lord Jesus, but when they walk out of their doors, how they run their families, how they teach their kids, how they talk about political issues, how they run things at work, has nothing to do with the God of the Bible. You've got Christian managers who get to work, but they are as toxic to the core because they have no commitment to the gospel of Jesus. Their leadership style is informed by Chicago men who run government programs, who are Christians, who today have presided over policies that impoverish communities. The reason why other neighborhoods are more wealthier or plush than other neighborhoods is precisely because of their policies. They come to church and sing the songs of Zion. You have Christian bankers today who preside over instruments, financial instruments that have impoverished, that determine of a race who gets higher interest, who gets lower interest. Nothing to do with the gospel of Jesus. They have never challenged that because the mind has been secularized. You have Christian food scientists who have accepted to sell poisonous food to our communities. They don't challenge that. Even when the Bible talks about my temple, this body is my temple. They don't challenge it because of profit and secularization. So the word of God is clear. There are those that have loved me with their heart and with their soul, but not with their mind. Their mind has not surrendered to the Lordship of Jesus. It is manufacturing everything you see in the society, not according to the line of Jesus. That's why we're in this mess today. You have Christian men, how do you talk about that, who have fathered 8 children, and they have left them and walked away. They are today respected Christian men. What type of church, what type of society is that? Brethren, I wish what I was talking about was just issues of theorizing. But it is not. It is highly dangerous when we live in this life and we allow our minds to be secularized, yet in body and soul we are a church. In South Africa, where I come from, there's a guy who wrote a book called De Grucci. And he writes this book and he mentions something very important. He writes that the separatist model of apartheid, separating blacks and whites, says that model, the government copied it from how it saw the church had structured its worship services. Of course, De Grucci goes more into this. But there is something interesting somewhere. In Burundi, you have a journalist, he's Bernard Henry Levi, who's a French journalist, writes in a major Italian weekly magazine. He writes an article called "Burundi Dies Every Day Except on Sabbath." The story is republished in a 2004 book called War, Evil, and End of History. Levi reported that while traveling in a war-torn Burundi, which borders Rwanda and is compromised by the same Hutu and Tutsi tribes, he asked a taxi driver to take him to the southern part of the country. The driver consented, but one condition. The trip had to be on Saturday. So, Bernard asked, why? The driver responded. He said, because the genocidal aggressors, those Hutu of the National Liberation Front, of which the whole country continues anyway, to repeat by memory, they are also good Christians, mostly of Adventist confession, who don't smoke, they don't drink, they have the Christian ethic. They arrive at villages singing loud song of music. They have the Christian practice and consider Saturday as a sacred day. They have the Christian spirituality dedicated to prayer, in which one must not kill. But those genocidal aggressors are the same one that murder people. It is a dangerous thing. That's why the Adventist theology had never allowed this separatist idea that there is the soul and the body somewhere. That's why Jesus Christ wanted to win the entire man. Because it is dangerous to live as a human being, to give your heart and your soul, but your mind is wrestling somewhere else. The scary thing. There's no telling what you can do to us tomorrow, because we don't know what feeds your mind. We don't know what motivates you. That is why some Christians asked back then, just after when we had the TRC Commission in South Africa, and some guy asked, says, wait a minute, Nico Smith, as a theologian, he writes called Facing the Truth. And they call a number of church communities. They say, you churches, well, including our Adventist church, by the way, it submitted there a written report unsigned, yes, but written report, to ask them, what were you doing when people were dying, gross human violations? But importantly, what was going on when some of your members who were sitting on the pews were the ones responsible for gross human violations? Then he says, what sermons were being preached on the pulpit that did not pique the conscience? We have to ask today, what sermons are being preached where they don't pique the conscience of people who are deadbeat fathers? What sermons are being preached? When people are serial predators, molesting young children, but are part of our church community, what sermons are being preached that don't pique the conscience? We have to ask ourselves. That when you are a neighbor who's known to be mean, unloving, you don't talk to anyone, we have to ask, what sermons are being preached that don't prick your conscience? Wherever you are, when it's just a military space, you're always fighting. Military zone. I don't have much time, but I want to close it with, we can do some other stuff later, some other time. I realize it's 12:45 right now. So let's look at something which I think are stellar examples. Are stellar examples of what do we call a Christian that has surrendered his mind to Jesus Christ. Let's give a critical example. You know, Paul talks about the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. And in the civil rights movement, you have a very important example. And I'm not getting into many things, but I want us, it's precisely this thing that Christians miss the whole issue. You know, there is, so I'm going to get into now, there's a sermon shared by Martin Luther King. It's called his Christmas sermon. And I'm going to highlight something when he talks about the beloved community. Because there's something we miss, that before Luther does this, love, the concept of love, agape, that we talk about in the church, was a mere sentimental, abstract emotion. In fact, Luther argues that it is Gandhi who takes this agape kind of love and operationalizes in the society to show what is its impact in healing communities. And it's because as Christians we have taken lightly. So you have Christians today, when they talk politics, they're ready to take up guns and arms. They have no idea that God has given us means and ways, that God's ideals. So what happens tomorrow? What happens tomorrow? Now you have caused a civil war. Women and children have died. Then how do you reconcile tomorrow? So Luther comes in and says, no, but Christ has given us a better way. A better way. And Luther, I can't get into many of these things, because Luther writes this in response to Friedrich Nietzsche's book by the time. Nietzsche had argued that love as Christians makes us weak. So, by the way, Hitler was using the same idea, that you've got to have men, who ride on different values, If we want to have people who lead out, who invent things, who lead out armies, He's saying, no, this love thing is problematic. So it's a response to that Luther King writes in his thesis dissertation, arguing just using the concept of love that we've forgotten as a Christian community. Because you have Christian men today, Christian men and women, who are willing at times to kill for political reasons. So let me read this. And he demonstrates what a Christian mind is like. Even in the depths of the most challenging situations. Listen to what he says in that sermon. The brilliancy of a Christian mind reflecting into a social issue. He says, We shall match your capacity to inflict suffering by our capacity to endure suffering. This is Martin Luther on that sermon. We will meet your physical force with the soul force. Do to us what you will, we will still love you. We cannot in all good conscience obey your unjust laws. I hope you see the balance of a Christian mind here. Because I cannot obey this thing. But I won't be as violent as you are towards me. He says, and abide by your unjust system, because non-cooperation with evil is a much more moral obligation as is a cooperation with good. So throw us in jail, we will still love you. Bomb our homes and threaten our children. As difficult as it is, we will still love you. And you find this, they narrate a situation where they were sitting at church and the police would throw tear gas, or some rioters outside, tear gas, and they would still be singing songs of Zion as a response to that injustice. Since why argue the method or whatever, but what's important? What's important, because we had a similar thing in South Africa in one of our universities. Our Sabbath school students, our students who are Sabbath school members, during this, what we call Fees Must Fall, and we see in a video clip one student take a brick to throw it to another student of a different color. Because part of this fight was a fight to reduce fees, because noble cause, they were excluding majority black students from accessing higher education. Noble work, noble justice, right? But the method was just not Christ-like. Because what happens when you hit the other person with the brick now? They are bleeding, and then what? So, and it's because we have not unearthed even powerful examples like these ones, that you can fight for justice in a winsome manner. That the same person we're fighting against is a candidate for heaven as well. But Jesus wants them in the kingdom as well. That balance. So I'm just using this as one of the examples. Let me close off with this. I'm going to read something very important, a passage right now. Let me close off with it. It comes from Michael Graham. So he then says we can finish off this summer time. He says, we may preach with all the fervor of a reformer and yet succeed in only winning a struggler here and there. We may permit the whole collective thought of the nation or of the world to be controlled by ideas which by restless force of logic, listen to this, prevent Christianity from regarded as anything more than a harmless delusion. It says, what is today a matter of speculation begins tomorrow to move armies and pull down nations. It's the most powerful passage. And what it means, brethren, is today someone is saying something. It's speculation, right? You are just playing around with this Friedrich Nietzsche idea. It's fascinating that love is for the weak. Tomorrow, Hitler uses it as a basis to extinct another race. Says, so this is a funny, and he's arguing this, that where at the center of the struggle today is who is capturing the imagination of the community. If it's not Jesus and it's someone else with some secular agenda, and the community is in trouble. And the question is, where is the Christian mind? When our children are being marketed and won over by moral celebrities, where are the model Christians to offer us an alternative? When our young kids, women, are sexualized in promoting certain things in marketing agencies, where are the Christians? That's what we have to ask ourselves. Where are the men and women who are going to reflect, give us a better way out of this mess? And our society is degenerated by these ideologies. What are God's people doing? Are we filling our minds with just soapies, soap operas and all that stuff? Society is struggling. Black men, young men. We did door to door the other time here, just at Detroit North. You get into homes. You know some of the homes you speak to them. You see some of the poverty traps, the struggles that go on. The question is what preoccupies the Christian mindset. When sinners are working day and night to devise methods and means and ways, what are God's people doing? What are we doing with our minds and times to offer a different way, to capture the imagination of the communities again, that they are won by the gospel of Jesus? Let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Our loving Father, words cannot save us, but we know you can. And we thank you for your words today that you spoke to us. We ask that they be attended by the power of your Holy Spirit. That as a church at Detroit North, we have work to do as members. That you would raise people to challenge the status quo, the atmosphere and the social milieu that exist in this world, the defeatist mindset that exists. That you would bring people who would spend hours, time, day in and out, working to reverse and replace the authority of your word. We ask this in your precious name. Amen. God bless you.